Avatars, blue people.
Avatar.
You mean that?
What I mean.
Anime.
Good evening, children. I have returned. A new Marvel show, another shill video. Moon Knight, everybody, an obscure character who looks cool and everyone is now an expert of. I enjoyed episode 1. It's like boom, wah, whoosh, ah, which is a nice welcome change to Marvel's typical as expected. It's got great performances, great production value. It's superhero fight club. The first episode is themed around walking with pain. We open with the villain Arthur Harrow smashing a glass and then putting the shards into his shoes, while our hero Stevie Grant is attached to a pillar as he's got troubles with waking up in different places. You could say instead of punishing his feet, he's punished by them, trapped by a troubled path he can't see. We are immersed into the life of someone with dissociative identity disorder and the complications that comes from living with it. One of the most noticeable symptoms of DID is depersonalization, where the individual has a dissociation switch go off and your personality is no longer in control, and you wake up needing to play detective over what happened, and that's what this entire first episode is really focused on.
My body wants to get up. You know, like it has to get the 10,000 steps in.
Stevie is a mild-mannered museum gift shop man who's deeply passionate about Egyptian history and is eager to share it. But there's another identity, Mark Spector, who operates another life. In the first episode, we only see the consequences from Stevie's point of view, from being set up on a date to missing it. However, despite being disadvantaged by his own body, Stevie is defined by his kindness and his capacity to roll with the punches. One of my favorite scenes is when he has to hide his heartbreak to himself, the waiter, and eventually his own mum. This is one area that I really dug with the show, which is that it's very sympathetic with its portrayal of DID, which should be commended. At least right now. I could go off the rails later on. As David Gleaves argued, for a long time, DID was not considered a psychiatric disorder of post-traumatic origin because it was considered a creation of the media and psychotherapy. Also, yes, you did hear me say trauma. The source of dissociative identity disorder comes from, guess what? Especially childhood ones. I'm bringing this up mainly because it helps explain the sharp changes between Stevie and Mark. DID is a defense mechanism against traumatic events, because if trauma is the inability to process a painful past, I just realized it's been a while since I've said that, haven't I? Then having a different identity locked out of its memory and operating under a different personality is a way to cope with it, to cut off certain portions of the brain's emotional and memory processing centers to protect us from the trauma. This is why dissociative amnesia is a symptom. Every time Stevie blanks out and returns, it's because Mark was activated to protect him. It's also why Khonshu is always pushing Stevie to step down. As a distinct identity, Mark is Stevie's protector. Therefore, despite the alienating and destabilizing effects, it does have a role as a survival technique. But what was the traumatic event that caused this fracture? Episode 2 doesn't get into any of that. Instead, it's more or less just mainly really fancy exposition, where we learn about Khonshu, Harrow's motives, and Marx's history. And it's all themed around justice, free will, and what's considered fair. Stevie's life is basically all ruined now. He's fired and is at war with Mark, who he discovers is a mercenary who's killed some folks, has a wife he's divorcing, and made a deal to be Khonshu's avatar.
Should we part, you may not like my next candidate. Near and dear as she is to you.
Spector's life is effectively one of penance, as he's protecting his love, and his mission to deliver Khonshu's justice is an act of redemption. A second chance after his death, and for his past sins. Which is ironic because it directly contrasts Harrow's POV, who believes in Amit's justice, which involves killing fools based on their potential to do evil as opposed to punish them after the fact.
What about a child? Would she kill a child for something they might do in 30 years?
It's not the most original conflict ever. We're doing the whole deontology versus consequentialism debates in terms of does the end justify the means, or are the means and ends to themselves. However, at least it's talked about and there is a philosophical aspect to it, as opposed to just bad guy wants revenge. And it feeds back into the broader message of accepting the complex dualities of life. Mark is someone who in Harrow's world would have been killed before he could have become a superhero. So should Stevie be judged by Mark's sin? There are two minds sharing one body, two lives and two loves. The problem isn't the existence of the sin, but how it's dealt with. As our hero's story shows, the growth of potential evil can also be branched into redemption. And by the end of the episode, that's seemingly what's kind of set up. Mark has to walk his path while Stevie's voice is by his side. Perhaps it's from the other mind, he'll figure out a new way to negotiate with Khonshu's coercion. Or maybe I'm completely wrong and we're gonna end with Egypt being blown up by f***ing Amit. I think the best thing about these two episodes are their sense of isolation, especially after Hawkeye. It's really refreshing to watch a Disney MCU show that isn't reliant on intertextuality or any broader narrative events to legitimize itself. Instead, everything feels earned. It's a character study that's very actor driven. The only real major two issues I'm having are the expository moments, because as much as Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke are f***ing awesome and they're extremely charismatic, they're still performing very utilitarian-like dialogue that's focused on world-building context. In a show like this, I think ambiguity and forcing the audience to pay attention to world-building clues as opposed to being very clear and open about everything would be a better fit in terms of continuing to immerse you into Stevie's mind, over what's real or what isn't. I get that by being part of the MCU it has to be clear in order to fit within the pre-existing cosmology, but I think they could have at least flirted it for a little bit longer. I don't know, maybe. Also, as much as the action is really fun, it feels oddly disjointed, because it has the whole, whoa, that was crazy. Anyways, moving on, sort of effect, which usually blends really well in other MCU stuff, but due to the psychological thriller dimension of the show, it makes the heightened cartoony side more weird. One thing that is very neat about the show's depiction of DID is that due to the broader supernatural elements of Khonshu, DID itself is implicitly treated as being more real. It's not a supernatural thing or is demonized with fantasy-like qualities. It's a human characteristic caused by human events, and is best treated with sympathy, not hostility. Episode 1 was about walking with pain. Episode 2 is about justice. Both are connected by the story of someone needing to find balance within themselves in order to live fairly for the benefit of the other.
What kind of servitude? The kind that leaves me covered in blood. Yeah, well, that blood is on my hands.
So I'm really hoping as the show progresses, there'll be a much more vibrant and interesting discourse around the show and its representation of DID. Because out of everything, I'm most interested in seeing how well this show will score in terms of clinical representation. Will Moon Knight get the right medical treatment, or accept that they're never truly alone and have to live with that? Will the show suck balls or be the next great point of reference? And more importantly, can it beat Tommy Lee Jones' depiction of Two-Face?
Baby, I'll show you mine. Show me your soul. Honey, it's way past time. How explicit do I have to be? Need I spell it out before you get it, baby?
Special thanks to everyone on Patreon. Videos are a bit scarce recently because there's a bunch of videos that I'm trying to get ready, finished, so then eventually there'll be a consistent stream of stuff. You got MTV Spider-Man, Iron Fist and Luke Cage, Batman Arkham Games, The Expanse, Evangelion, The Truman Show. They're projects that are all in very healthy positions. I'm expanding this channel, guys. Bear with me.
I need a hero, da hero at the end of the night. He's gotta be strong, he's gotta be...